we've created this environment of post-competitive solutions. So thinking about how we normally interact in a source selection, it's always like, I can't really talk to them. I shouldn't send them an email, or if I tell them something, I have to tell them something, right? Like that normal kind of hush-hush have to be within all of those red tape lines. So now you can have really candid conversations. You can engage with a solution provider. I'll make up numbers, but if contracting had 10 steps, we've effectively taken care of, maybe 1, 2, and 3 on behalf of the department as it pertains to buying AI. My name is Ryan Connell. I'm with the Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office here today to talk about Tradewinds. Just a quick introduction. I'll let you guys self-introduce. So, Stephanie, want to start?
Stephanie Wilson, CDAO.
Kristina Botelho, Air Force Contracting Officer.
Hey, Tony Kwag. I'm the CEO of BidScale, representing the industry point of view.
All right, we'll just go overview of what Tradewinds is, right? So at a high level, Tradewinds is CDAO's place for acquisition experimentation. So big picture ethos, let's try things to help the acquisition workforce in terms of novel contracting pathways or AI-powered tools that support the acquisition mission. Specifically, one of the experiments that has gotten some legs and taken off, and I think it's experiment number 3 or something, is the solutions marketplace. I've started to use the analogy like we call Kleenex by brand name instead of what it actually is. Like Kleenex, we tend to call tissue Kleenex, right? And I'm like, that's how we're getting into this brand because the solutions marketplace has grown in popularity. We often just hear people call it Tradewinds, but I like to differentiate between big umbrella Tradewinds and the solutions marketplace. All right, so solutions marketplace at a high level is effectively a solicitation, a call for AI relevant solutions, AI, ML, data, digital solutions. We have some strategic focus areas, and it is I guess on paper, I'd call it a source selection on a monthly basis, right? And traditionally, we've seen maybe like a CSO or some vehicle where you get white papers or proposals as the answer to that solicitation. Under our program, it's 5-minute pitch videos. So a solution provider provides a 5-minute pitch video. It goes into an assessment on a monthly basis and moves its way into the marketplace. Regulatorily, I'll say it that way, right? What we're actually doing on paper aligns with 3 pillars of regulations. So the first one being a broad agency announcement, been in FAR for years now. Everyone's familiar with the BAA. Limitations there is, of course, you're buying basic or applied research. From there, you have some requirements under a BAA, things like having a technical or scientific review assessment. But FAR Part 6 tells us it's full and open competition. The second pillar is something called a CSO, commercial solutions opening, right? So a relatively DoD unique, I think GSA and DHS have the same authority, but not all the federal agencies do. I like to describe it as a BAA, except we can buy solutions. We can buy, not limited to research, right? So as long as it's innovative or meeting a capability gap, you have this authority to buy solutions under this CSO program. And that's in DFARS 212. DFARS 206 tells us that's full and open competition. And that third pillar is what I would say DIU effectively invented the statute for, is the solicitation for another transaction. Back when it was DIUX and invented the CSO, there's a slight nuance between the CSO that's in DFARS and the solicitation for an OT, the statute. So regulations, you guys are tracking those 3 pillars. Right. So when we created the marketplace and the vision for what that was going to be. We made sure it was aligned with those 3 things. Questions? Stephanie, you want to add anything to that?
No, you covered it.
All right. So talked about it being done on a monthly basis, right? So every single month there's this open call. The first of the month, it begins that solicitation period. The end of the month stops. That collection of videos goes into assessment, goes into that source selection process. Right, there's a set of criteria in SAM, just like any competitive action, and what they're going to be evaluated for. That takes about 2 weeks, depending on the size of a number of videos, the number of solution providers that come in. That moves its way through that process, and then instead of CDAO making contract awards as a result of the monthly solicitation, they're either considered awardable or not awarded. Right, so that's the bigger nuance or difference between what we'd see like a normal CSO for a specific requirement. Ours is really just more broad in terms of AI, ML, data, digital, and we're doing that on a monthly basis, and they become awardable, not awardable. The not awardables, receive their feedback. They can reach out to get one-on-one time if they want to understand why they weren't, considered awardable. We've seen things ranging from as basic as the requirement for a 5-minute pitch video, and the proposal that comes in is an hour and a half, right? And so you just didn't read the instruction, that kind of thing, right? There is kind of like a first catch that usually catches those. So someone watches that video in the first 24 hours of it being submitted. And so in the example of the hour and a half submission, they were notified like the next day, you're not even going to be considered and reviewed for part of the competition because you just completely missed the mark. And as long as they're within that month, they can just try again effectively based on that feedback. For those that actually go through assessment are considered not awardable, they're given that feedback. Because this is done on a rolling basis, month over month, that solution provider can take that feedback and just try again the next month to be into the solution marketplace. So just wanted to kind of level set that, understand the marketplace, and then now I'm going to dive into why or what the point of that is and how the rest of the department can use it. So effectively, we've created this environment of post-competitive solutions, right? And so thinking about how we normally interact in a source selection, it's always I can't really talk to them. I shouldn't send them an email, or if I tell them something, I have to tell them something, right? Like that normal kind of hush-hush, have to be within all of those red tape lines. We're now in a post-competitive environment. Everyone who's in the solutions marketplace has competed and won to be there, right? So now you can have really candid conversations. You can engage with us from a government perspective, right? You can engage with a solution provider. It gives them an email right there. So I can say, hey, I watched your video. I really liked what you were offering. Here's what I'm looking for. It sounds very similar. Can I get a price proposal based on what you provided in that video? Right. So if contracting, I'll make up numbers, but if contracting had 10 steps, we've effectively taken care of, maybe 1, 2, and 3 on behalf of the department as it pertains to buying AI and ML. Does that make sense? Questions?
I'm sorry. Hi, Tim Applegate from the Air Force. So I understand the awardable, unawardable. The awardable was based on a 5-minute video. Whether it's under the OTA, CSO, or BAA as the mechanism for providing that 5-minute video, is that video fairly specific? Because I was with you until you said they now become part of the commercial marketplace, and I can go and say, hey, I liked your video. I want something similar. Give me a price for that. Or is it you were determined awardable based on your 5-minute pitch for something specific? Is that all I can buy from you?
Yeah, so a couple comments there. One is that I'd say it's specific to a solution, right? So a lot of these companies have a product branded at whatever they want to brand it as, right? This is their AI/ML platform. This is their solution. This is their product. It's specific to that, but like anything else, I can think of an example that comes to mind that was the example they showed in the use case of the video was related to insurance fraud, for example, right? I'm not buying insurance fraud, but I can see very much how that exact technology could be something I would be interested in for a different use case, just different data, but it's the same tech. So just like any proposal or any contract, you'd want to stay within scope of what was part of that video. So don't view it as oh my God, Acme company provided a video. I can now let Acme company sell me anything. Definitely not. You want to be within scope of that video. The way the marketplace is also set up is it's 1 video per solution, not 1 video per company, right? So a company, if they have 10 commercial products that they want to sell solutions, they can submit 10 videos for each of the solutions. Does that help? Please.
I was just going to say one point of clarification on that. Obviously, because it is a CSO, you obviously have to have some sort of strategic focus areas. And obviously, it's not going to be prescriptive, but we have strategic focus areas that each one of the solutions, like Ryan had said, a company can put in a solution for 5 different focus areas. So that's where they're getting the idea of where they should be leading that particular solution video towards. So for example, predictive maintenance. If they have something that can help us with predictive maintenance, then that solution video is going to be for that particular strategic focus area. So if you come in looking for something for predictive maintenance, then you know to go into that particular area. And, again, riffing off of what Ryan said about staying within that scope, the scope is really that strategic focus area. And if you think about it, when it's not prescriptive like that, and we're looking at the things that are under a CSO, you still have a fairly broad range of saying, okay, what I'm doing is actually prescriptive maintenance, and I could use any of these vendors within that focus area. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry. I know it's early in your presentation. I don't mean to dominate with the questions, and without seeing the agenda, I'm not sure where you're going. So my understanding, and I think some of the frustration within the Air Force has been there's great solutions in the commercial market space, but they haven't been approved or have authority to operate as an LLM. And so if I want to go to them, I still need to work it with our CAO or our CN to figure out how to get that to be authorized to operate on the network. And I think that might be, is that a true statement?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I'll let you add if you have more, Stephanie. It's definitely a challenge, right? I mean, we, or at least I know of ATO'd LLMs that exist. So it's not the unicorn that maybe it was a year ago. And I think you have one, right? Internally. But yeah, that's absolutely a thing, an area of challenge. But like a lot of the contracting, at least we do in CDAO when it comes to things like artificial intelligence, we're doing a lot of piloting, experimentation, and rapid and iterative contracting. And so, phase 1, phase 2 for small little chunks are kind of proving the state of technology, things like that. And then, working the cyber kind of concurrently. And so we're kind of progressively moving with the vendor to get to a point, whether they're going through a specific AO in the military or doing like the second front or Palantir route, one of those. We're getting there just together because it's a growing market. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we don't necessarily need the ATOs or the ATO process starting off, but when we do get to that point, we can either help that company partner up with companies that already have ATOs, and we can pipeline through their ATO. Also at CDAO, we're working on an assess-only process for ATOs so that we can take, for example, what you guys have done in the Air Force, or you guys can come in for something that we've done with an ATO. And if your AO is willing to take the assess-only process that we're developing, you guys could potentially pipeline into our ATO. So again, there's no clean solution to an ATO in any way, shape, or form because it's a screwy system. So, but besides that, what we're trying to do is we're trying to take multiple pathways into actually forming some sort of council of councils, for lack of better terminology, where we can have some reciprocity with the ATOs and making sure that if you need something that we have, why couldn't you pipeline into our ATO and vice versa?
Yeah, definitely super optimistic for the reciprocity that came out in the CIO.
I'm trying to stay positive.
I am. I think it's going to be a good thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Good morning, Ryan. My name is Carmen Zapata. I am the Chief Technology Officer for ForwardThink. And I love the conversation around ATO because my question was more centered around what does it look like for vendors who have a technology that is still in prototype and is being done, for example, at another agency like DHS, right? And we're looking to be in the marketplace, but we're in a very low technology readiness level. What does that process look like to engage and be on the marketplace to potentially have others in the DoD marketplace help us continue to prototype and get that product out?
Yeah, so the marketplace is TRL-agnostic, meaning it's self-identified. So you would say, I believe my product is TRL level 5. There's no like validation on our end. But yeah, I've seen, I think there was a TRL level 2 last month, for example, that was proposed. So we've kind of seen the gamut. The majority are self-claimed TRL level 9.
Okay.
But we've seen the range.
It's good to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. Any other questions before I keep going?
She had one in the back.
So just wanted to know kind of as you kick off the conversation, what are like the KPIs and metrics that you have in place for success for Tradewinds? Like what are you looking at to see?
Yeah, I'll try to answer that. So, I think like I kind of led the conversation off, the big Tradewinds is our acquisition experimentation ethos, our umbrella. The solution marketplace was just an idea, right? And like most experiments, we're just, let's try it. We launched officially in November 2022. I think we saw our first award in November 2023. So I generally, when I come and do these sessions, I get like what's the impact to the department? And I don't have a great answer yet because we had our first award 8 months ago, right? And so I'm kind of waiting for that like actual use case of like, because of Tradewinds, I made my contracting go in this many days. And as a result of that, this is what I now have for the warfighter. I don't have that last part of the sentence yet. Kristina, shameless plug, has a 9-day award from the marketplace. So Air Force used the marketplace and made an award in 9 days from first making contact to the vendor. But I don't know. I think I don't know enough yet to have like specific KPIs. I'd like to think that my PALT, for example, should be less than the rest of DoD's PALT. Like that would be something that comes to mind. I was just talking this morning. I don't think I have a specific number in mind in terms of, and I don't want to, in terms of like the number of percent or the percentage of awardable, not awardable. Like, I don't want to set a goal of, I want 80% of the videos to be awardable, right? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. I don't know if you have anything to add.
So we do track some of the metrics, just because obviously we all have bosses, right? We all have people that we have to report up to say, this is the thing that we have going on and this is how we're working it. So we do track. And again, I totally agree with what Ryan is saying. When I say that we're tracking metrics, it's not because we're trying to hit a goal of how many vendors we have in there, right? We want to make sure that this is a robust marketplace, but we are tracking the number of vendors who come in that submit. We are tracking the number of vendors who don't make it and might need that one-on-one feedback. And obviously we have a count of who's in the vendor pool. We're also working on trackability of, for example, Air Force coming in and using the marketplace, because we're interested in how many other government agencies or even non-DoD agencies are potentially using Tradewinds. Right now, it's mostly word of mouth, and we're friends, so I know what she's doing and she knows what I'm doing. So we do have some metrics going on, and the way that we're right now, since we're still a little new, that we're tracking success is the fact of, do people understand what Tradewinds is? Do people understand, not only, like Ryan already touched on it already, is that, we're kind of being branded as the solutions marketplace, but Tradewinds itself is an ecosystem that allows multiple pathways to award. So are people understanding the difference between that? And are people understanding what the marketplace can potentially do? And the third is, can I use marketplace? And if you are, what was the success rate for that? Did you actually get an award out of that? Are things ongoing? So we are doing some metric reading from that, because again, we all have bosses and we all have to, talk about the higher ups and what we're doing. And I only have one point of clarification. The first award was February, not November.
Oh, okay. Good to know. February.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move on? All right. The next slide that you would see is a comparison of just like traditional acquisition pathways and non-traditional acquisition pathways. I think a lot of you are familiar with the general things that are on this slide, right? But you go to like an FPDS, you look up just PALT timeline. So day of solicitation to day of award. That's our generic PALT metric, right? You'll see FAR 15s in like a year, right? Somewhere in that 360 days. In that category, you start seeing things like FAR Part 12, FAR Part 13 dropping to 180 days, 120 days. I think the last time I looked at 13, it was 80 days, somewhere in that territory. I used the example earlier of the 9-day award, right? I think that's a exaggeratory bullet point. I'm not expecting that we're going to have a 9-day average. I also think we have to kind of redefine what PALT means for the marketplace, right? Because we post a generic solicitation on SAM that's going to be good until we find the need to update it, right? So it's not fair that if my last, I just posted one in June, for example, but let's say the one before that was the prior June. If you just happen to discover the technology and reached out today, it shouldn't count as a year plus PALT, right? So we have to kind of redefine what that means. We've been kind of just right now using like the first contact. So as a government buyer, I watched a video. I like the solution. I'm going to reach out. That's day one. That's what we've been using. I think that's still open for discussion. We're still experimenting in that area to kind of go back to the KPI conversation. But I bring it up because it is significantly less than how I led with the 360 days, things like that. So fast, I think that's important. We all know that's important. The other one I hit is low barrier to entry. So there's a story where there was a DoD buyer who effectively watched a video, wanted the solution, and reached out. And the solution provider was like, oh crap, I don't actually have a company. Like I just I proposed an idea, right? So talk about low TRL level. Right. And the DoD entity wanted it so badly that they were willing to kind of handhold them. Like, here's how you get an LLC. Here's how you register in SAM. Here's how you get a cage code. Here's how you get DUNS. Right. So we've purposely structured this in a manner where it's so easy to get in from the barrier to entry standpoint that we don't care if you're registered in SAM yet. Like it will find buyers you might find buyers that are okay with that and wanting to handhold it because of your novel solution. So all of that said, we're still then putting the what I'll call contract vetting onto whoever's buying it, right? So don't assume if you find a solution in the marketplace that they're in SAM, that they're good to go from every other contracting vetting criteria that would be on the contracting officer and their normal due diligence work. All right. So weird timing of NCMA, but this is our May assessment pushing into June. So these are my June slides. I think tomorrow I'll get an updated slide deck with July. But effectively, you're seeing something like almost 700 solutions being proposed into the marketplace. Our rate of success getting to awardable is somewhere around 40%, right? So it's not, we talk about low barrier to entry purposely in terms of wanting to cater to really novel solutions, like opening up that aperture, but not making it necessarily easy that anyone can be in the marketplace. So there is, just like any other source selection, you have your criteria you're going to be evaluated against. Team does that assessment on a monthly basis. So that kind of pass-fail rate, if you will, getting into awardable is about 40%. So as of last month, there was just about 300 videos in the marketplace. Again, 300 solutions, not necessarily 300 providers. So tracking somewhere around 42, I think it might be 43 now, awards that have either happened or are tracking that they're in progress. This is a challenge area for us in terms of reporting. So I bring that to light because the way that it's structured is accessibility, right? So you're a government buyer, you're watching a video, you have an email address where you can reach out to. If you reach out and effectively go through the process and make a contract award, I'll say you should reach out to us because we would provide you the solicitation and assessment documentation that would let you justify your contract file and document it accordingly, whether you're using a BSA, a BAA, a CSO, or a solicitation for an OT. So we likely will know about it because of that. But effectively, if you didn't reach out to us, government or seller, we wouldn't know about the award. So that's an area that we're working on in terms of being able to actually report. And again, going back to KPI. We have a question back here.
So I'm just curious. It appears that you made one award. And when we're talking about awards, are we talking about other transaction agreements or are we talking about a FAR-based award? Depending on your response, I have a follow-on question for that.
Yeah, more than one award. So the number that's on the screen is kind of a combination of awards and tracking. I think it's about 20 have happened and 22 are happening. So that's the first part of your question. The second part is it's kind of on the contracting officer to write their own story, depending with the authorities they have and all of that, right? So two of those three pillars that I talked about at the beginning are FAR-based or can be, right? So a BAA is in FAR. You're going to write a FAR contract. CSO, I think you have the flexibility to go OT or FAR-based, something like a FAR 13.5, for example. And then if you write it up as a solicitation for an OT, obviously you're going to be awarding an OT.
Okay. So if you made an OT award, what's your pathway to production? Because the OT under the statute itself is going to be for a prototype.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, kind of hit on this a little bit before, but a lot of the awards that we're making or the ones that we're aware of, especially the ones that we're talking about within CDAO are incremental experiments, right? I mean, so we're starting off with like a small pilot, like can we test the technology? How does it work? How does it interoperate? Getting to a prototype, maybe a year or two prototype, and we're working that action to what defines success in the contract terms to the point that we can get to.
Yeah, but have you made a production contract? Has there been a successful transition?
Ryan, I can speak to that. So,
yeah, please.
I'm with BitScale, so we're part of industry, and the answer to that is yes. So our first award was through another transaction that was off of Tradewinds, but as we were shifting from prototype and pilot into a production phase, the grievance officer, who eventually became our contracting officer, utilized Tradewinds to ultimately issue a FAR-based contract rather than continuing our OT kind of history.
So, are you tracking percentages of like successful transitions? And what are they if you have them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe we are within CDAO in terms of what the rest of DoD is using when they're putting things on contract. I don't necessarily have the visibility to.
No, I'm talking about CDAO. I'm not talking about. Yeah.
Do you have it? Yeah, go ahead.
So we will be, because right now a lot of the awards that we've done. So for example, I've done 15 of them. Kristina, how many have you done? 6.
5. I have 2 in process.
Yeah. So we're still fairly young in the prototyping phase. Me personally, and I'll let Kristina speak to it. Me personally, I don't usually like to prototype past 2 years, because I feel like at that point you're just kind of playing. So some of them will be starting to come up to production, but right now, because again, we just launched, I shouldn't say just, but we're still fairly new in the solutions marketplace. We're still in the prototyping phase for a lot of what we're doing. So eventually when we get to that point of production, yes, that will start to become one of our metrics.
And then one last question for the panel. I was wondering, how do you guys work with, because you mentioned like some companies that were so new that you were hand-holding them. How do you deal with low TRL level technologies? Mm-hmm. And what do you consider success with those lower TRL level technologies where you won't see production not for a while?
So it's harder when they're lower TRL. Some of the customers will start down the path of prototyping with them so that they can experiment in a way that they can determine if it'll solve their problem or not. Sometimes it ultimately can't solve their problem. And then other times they find it did solve their problem. Now they have to go through the ATO process, or now they have to find funding to move into production. And things like that can sometimes slow them down. But I don't think there's any right answer to what is success.
And kind of going back to Ryan's story about how there was a company that people were very interested in, I would say probably 5 of the ones that I've done have been on that lower TRL, 2 and 3. We contemplated, because we are allowed underneath what we have in the announcement to go into a research OT if we really wanted to, so that way we could kind of help build up the TRL for them. But we were actually able to stay the OT under 4022. And we were able to stay that way and be able to handhold them. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact of it really depends on the AO that you have. If they are really willing to support that company as they move through the process and help them to handhold, which we've been fine with. So again, like Kristina said, there's no real right answer to that. But I think as long as you're willing to support that company to get to a potential end solution, the companies so far that we've been working with have been really eager to work with us because they kind of have that insider handholding from a government entity. Yeah.
I'll also add, when we entered into Tradewinds, we were at a higher TRL, but obviously at some point in our company history, we were at a lower TRL. Had we had access to a platform like Tradewinds, it would have had much more frictionless conversations, because the agreements our point of contact who eventually became our agreements officer in the OT prototype, like they had to jump through so many hoops to even get to that OT. And then also like they were trying to push us into like subcontracting through a totally irrelevant entity, right? Like the lack of alternatives, if only for the lack of alternatives, I think this, it kind of highlights, this opens up a brand new pathway into capability and conversations that are less dogmatic than some of the other pathways that have existed to date. So I think a lot of the messaging here is continues to be a work in progress, but it is the best work in progress of all the options. So we've been super happy with the platform.
All right. I know we hit some of this pre-slides. I kind of just, we had to ad-lib there but a little bit, but effectively from the actual process, right? So you're creating a video, or industry's creating a video, right? 5 minutes, please, not an hour and a half, right? Foot stomp. Right. It's going through that monthly assessment process. I talked about the candidness of conversation and, in that post-award environment where there can be this candid back and forth. I think the feedback, Ryan's opinion, I think the feedback that we provide to the non-awardables is actually pretty good. So there's 3 assessors. So 3 people watch the video and they have all of their notes, and you get a copy of that effectively. So you effectively know the reason that you weren't considered awarded, or you should. And then the follow-up to that is you can actually request, I think they call it real person time, but a real human time. But effectively you can have a meeting with the team of assessors or some of them and effectively understand why you may not have been considered awardable. And then again, path forward for you, if you want to, is you can effectively clean up those comments and resubmit the following month. So that's pretty straightforward, I think. In terms of then it moving on to assessment, like I said, it goes into that month's source selection, gets reviewed again, probably 2 weeks. And from there, I mean, if it's the day after the decision's made, that the solution providers are notified if they're either awardable or not. And those that are awardable are in the marketplace for procurements from. So I think it's interesting when you actually dig into BAA and a CSO in FAR and DFARs. It kind of gives you some latitude in terms of like full open, broad, or having narrowed focus areas. We chose the latter. So we have this AI, ML, data, digital environment because we're CDAO, right? Like that's our limiting factor of our mission set. And then we decided to create, now 14, it was 10, we added 4 more recently, strategic focus areas. So when you're uploading your video, you're effectively selecting which one of these you believe you best fit into your solution. On the government side, you can, this is a filter you have when you're doing your search. And you can kind of down select from there in terms of what you're looking for. The 4 that were just added, I'll just highlight, are related to assurance and responsible AI in those categories. And as we mature as a organization, CDAO, we're I don't want to say playing nice, but we're effectively finding some friends, right? So we have our responsible AI friends in policy, and so we're standing up some ways to help them with their requirements as well. And this is one of those. We get 75% of the solutions provided come in on the last day of the month, which is, it is what it is, right? But like I mentioned earlier, how there's sort of that like 24-hour view that happens and then the decision of you going to assessment or not. So I just would recommend that not doing the last day of the month in case for whatever reason you missed a pretty administrative instruction. You'll at least get notified the day after, 15th, 3rd, whatever it is, and you have the rest of the month to fix that before it goes into that month's assessment. To kind of put some numbers to it, I'll give rough numbers, but I think last month we had something like 85 or 86 submissions, and 65 of those went to assessment. So like that gap just didn't even make like that general 24-hour cut, I'll call it. And it's a significant amount. So I just highlight that in terms of if they had submitted earlier in the month, they would have gotten that feedback right away and potentially would have been reviewing 86 videos instead of 65.
Quick question for you. I hear that you guys are building up the library, and it's you're getting up and running. But is there any thought right now into managing the library? At what point do you have so many videos, so much capability, and what have you? Is there an off-ramping game plan or any contemplation of that, or that's a little bit further down the road? Not something, because it could hit the point that it turns into a little bit more cumbersome, and there's so many solutions you're missing solutions, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I have a lot of thoughts. I think everything I'm about to say isn't necessarily action or planned path forward, but I'll give you the thoughts. One is, in order to qualify to use the CSO regulation, right, by DFARS statute or by DFARS regulation, it has to be innovative or meeting capability gap, right? And the state of technology moving so quickly, it may be hard to fathom the idea that November 2023's first video is still innovative in 2026, right? As an example. So we've had some internal conversations about like some form of sunset, be it 2 years, 3 years, whatever that is. So that's an ongoing conversation. We would want to make sure that we're communicating that with the providers, and then all of a sudden they're just not in the marketplace, right? Don't want that to happen. We're talking about maybe there's like a self-assessment where like they can say like, hey, my video is still innovative and it stays in, like that kind of thing. So a lot of conversations in that area. Haven't made a decision yet, but that's definitely on our radar. And the other part of your question, I think, is super interesting. So it's because it's been on my mind too, in terms of scaling, right? Like you have 300 solutions today that you can browse from. If next year there's 3,000, and let's say we're looking at something like data labeling, and you go in as a requirements owner, you type in data labeling, and there's 45-minute videos. Like, have we really saved you any time, right? And so, wanting to solution out additional ways to scope your research, understand differentiation. Stephanie's been working on like a side project where we'll have some ability to kind of pulse the marketplace. Like, here's something that I need, a small little thing. Who can do it? I want to be cautious to not have that be an additional competitive down select, like regulatorily, right? Because we're already in this post competition, so I don't want to add additional competition by the standards of FAR and DFARS and regulation. So I started using like opt-in or something, like some way to just like pulse who's interested in a particular effort. I hope that helps.
Yeah, and Ryan, if I can also add, so from the perspective of being cumbersome, I think the 5-minute video restriction actually reduces the cumbersomeness a lot. So imagine if in an alternative universe that it was just like 50-page proposals and you had a library of 50-page proposals to read through, versus if you require industry to really hone their message and focus on like 3 to 5 minute video pitch, you can get through a lot of those in a very short amount of time. It really does refine the message. Again, if you give me an opportunity to write a 50-page proposal, I'm going to take up all 50 pages. If you restrict me to 5 minutes, I'm going to have to get to the pertinent points. And so it does allow for a refinement of message that you may not alternatively find in just like pages upon pages of linear text.
See a question here. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Hi. Thanks again. A lot of great information. 2 quick related questions. One is, where do you get your your pool of subject matter experts to do the tech eval or the peer review, if a BA, et cetera. And then if a cognizant contracting activity wants to engage and start a contract with an awardable solution, is there a data package that documents the pre-award, the solicitation, so that that contracting office doesn't have to create that from scratch or bug you guys to get it?
So on the first question, it's a combination of government, academia, and industry. We have a industry partner that does a lot of the assessment for us. So we have that solution provided as a service to us. But in order to be, inherently governmental, like this past month, I was the SSA, right? So like I'm reviewing all of those videos, assessment package that they put together for me to kind of sign off on or make changes to. I think that the government assessors are voluntary, right? We can find other DoD subject matter experts that want to help. They're more than welcome to be part of the assessment team. The industry partner that we have has to pay assessors, right, for those that are subject matter experts in the industry side. So they solution that for us, but it's those three categories on purpose: government, industry, and academia. The second part of your question is, absolutely. Like, we want you to reach out for that solicitation because it lets us know that you're going to make an award, which is great for our metrics to just know about. But in addition to that, I mean, I effectively feel like you have to in order to have an appropriately documented contract file to see what solicitation looked like and the assessment that was done by the assessors. So we provide that as a package to you.
Yeah. Can you talk a bit about how the government customers review? How many offices are reviewing your videos, and how often are they selected? And then can you also talk about you have the 14 different categories. Do you have any kind of breakout on those? Like how many cybersecurity, how many kind of pure ML, that kind of stuff? So
the latter part of your question, I have it. So I'm just trying to pull it up. The top left one, improving situational awareness and decision making, is by far the most popular one. Like when you actually on the government side and you're looking, if I had to put, I don't want to mess up the numbers, but I would guess that there's 100 or 150 in that category, and then the remainder is spread out through the other 11, right? So or 13. So that one is by far the most popular. And I apologize. What was the first part of your question?
Kind of talk about like how much engagement you have with the different government offices, and who's coming to you all, looking through the catalog, looking through the videos and the like.
Yeah. And I mean, we talked about this being an experiment, right? It really is. I think that there's been some proof that there's a demand signal on the industry side, right? Where we're seeing the videos come in. So we're doing something right in terms of targeting industry and having these low barriers to entry and effectively getting to an environment where industry wants to support DoD, which is great. On the government side, that's an area that we're trying to tackle. I mean, there's the conversations, go on LinkedIn any day and you'll see a LinkedIn post that says, the Tradewinds contract is illegal, right? And I'm like, the Tradewinds isn't a contract. Like, so people just don't understand what it actually is. And so there's miscommunication. And so that's why we're here. So I think there's ongoing conversations that have to happen on the government side to help them understand what this actually is at the root and how we can help them. We started to build a champions council. And so Kristina is our Air Force champion, right? And that solution has been nice. So working with an Air Force customer, for example, and they're like, I don't know if I can do this. I'm like, listen, I know someone that speaks your Air Force language. Meet Kristina. She's done it. Like, so that kind of solution has been helpful for us. But yeah, I think to your point, like I don't have good numbers to answer your question, right? So it's just this ongoing education piece and trying to continually, I don't want to say convince, but show how this can be impactful to our defense customers.
Yeah. If I can also add, so as we, as a industry member, as we have conversations with potential government customers and as we do demos and such, we've actually been actively routing people to the Tradewinds marketplace, partly because it is, from our experience, it's been low friction on the industry side, low friction on the government side. So it has been, vehicle's not the technically correct word, but like it's been our preferred pathway for these type of contracting and agreement actions for us. So we have actively routed people and, sometimes they have questions and we've not heard any pushback. Like they'll reach out to Ryan directly, for example, to say like, okay, now that I'm in here, how do I do this? And so I think Ryan mentioned previously, like there's an ecosystem that's building, and it's not just an ecosystem of government agencies, but like industry has a vested interest in making sure that this ecosystem is successful because it's It solves a lot of problems. It solves a lot of challenges. And it's also a higher concentration and density of people who are really serious about, the technology focus areas that you see in front of you. So as you start aggregating both sides of the transaction, like into this one ecosystem, the conversations are more and more fruitful. So we've just been funneling and routing people to the marketplace.
Yeah, awesome. Any questions before I move on? One thing I'll hit on this slide. I forgot I moved back. This slide is just the criteria. So it talked about it being a solicitation on sam.gov, so anyone can go there, read the actual instructions. But I'll just quickly highlight the actual rubric includes the problem you're solving, your solution, your impact to DoD, how different you are, differentiation, right? You have to talk about your pricing model. We're not asking for your price, but just like, are you charging per user? Are you charging per compute? Is it a firm fixed price to build a tool? Like, just help us understand your pricing structure. And then just like overall quality of the pitch. So those are effectively the criteria that's done in terms of how they're being evaluated during the source selection. All right, just I think I used Gemini to make a image so that public affairs would be okay with me using an image. So this is not Kristina, but I'll just turn it over to you if you have anything to add from the Air Force perspective as someone who's bought using Tradewinds.
Trust me, you will not catch me on a treadmill. So I've done a few actions now. Some of the easier ones were when we were doing just straight software license buys. For those, I do tend to lean towards Firebase because they're smaller actions. I don't have to go through any review cycles or get determination signed off on like I would with another transaction. Those, like you said, I was able to get one done in 9 days. There was another one. It took a little longer, but that was because we were waiting for money. I mean, we had everything ready to go in less than a week because it was just that easy. I'm working another one that's a little more technically complex. All the work is OCONUS. It's being integrated into another major system. It's got to go on JWIX. It's got to be TS. And it's for a military exercise that's coming up really quick. So there's a lot more complexity into it. But even with that being said, we started talking to them the first or second week of June, and I think we'll have contract award either by the end of next week or the week after the latest. And that was just about $10 million. So it really varies in terms of timelines and what you need to get it done. Some things can go very, very quickly, and others will take a little bit of time. But I found, especially the bigger ones that require reviews, legal, my lawyer came, he's like, you never give me anything easy. What is happening? So I gave him just a memorandum, an MFR, that just went through what the acquisition was. And it also explained why Tradewinds meets the competition requirements and the type of acquisition we're doing. And in addition to that, I gave them a copy of the call. I gave them a copy of the customer handbook they have for government users, which is very clear, concise. It's only 8 pages. It's wonderful. And that really helped them to understand Tradewinds, how it was competitive. Process we were using was legal and ethical. We identified how we went about finding them. You don't have to go through this competitive process to find them. Some of the vendors, they were out demoing and pitching to some commander or something, and they decided they wanted to give it a try. They said, okay, we're on Tradewinds. That's your market research. It's not, I went out with an RFI and looked for as many as I could. You already know it's been competed. It's on Tradewinds. You can just go to direct. So things like that. It's just that initial conversation with your legal and your policy advisors so that they feel comfortable with it. We get things done really quick now that we've gone through that initial review. I don't get the questions that I got the first time around. So I would just say be open, communicate, work with them, and get that first one under their belt so that moving forward, everyone else can have an easier time going through the reviews as well.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. And then just to hear from Tony from an industry perspective.
Yeah, thank you. So not to focus too much on the slide, but we're BidScale. We're an AI-powered contracting platform using AI to really help contracting officers, federal procurement and acquisition professionals click a button, generate a statement of work or a price negotiation memorandum in under 30 seconds. So happy to talk about that further, but not necessarily the platform for that conversation. Our experience has been, I would say we're like a bigger to medium small business. But we've gone through the ringer of, pre-Tradewinds world where we were lower TRL. We had to kind of scrap our way through within the existing constructs to try to work with government customers who were very interested in us and interested in the capabilities that we had to offer, but nonetheless were restricted in the ability to partner. And so I've been in this industry for quite a bit, and given my background, I went through the traditional channels, and I won't call out any specific pathways, but we were subcontracting on a number of vehicles. We acquired our own vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. But the challenges there were that those vehicles, for all intents and purposes within their specific domains, like maybe it is beneficial, but they're very specific, right? Like they have, hey, here's a schedule and you have to have these specific line items. And in order to change those line items, you have to submit a change request, and then you have to do annual maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. Also, you have to do hundreds of pages of paperwork, which may or may not necessarily be conducive to like your capability to deliver or your ability to deliver a specific capability to an agency, but it's more the administrative stuff. All that's to say, like, it doesn't align with the natural fluid conversations that we would have with our customers to say, like, you have a problem, we can solve that problem. Okay, great. But like, let's start talking about a whole different domain topic of like, what vehicles you have, et cetera, et cetera. And for us, Tradewinds was really a blessing because it opened the aperture to have a conversation really focused on problem solving more so than just like, the other aspects of getting awarded. And it's led to a degree of flexibility that, again, is just conducive to the conversations, natural conversations you would have about solving the problem. You can spend more time focusing on that as well, rather than the logistics of trying to get something on contract or on agreement. I will add one more perspective. And again, we are still a small business, and within a small business, we have limited resources to do business development and do proposal writing and such. And so for us to access an ecosystem of government agencies that are highly invested and interested in the future of AI and applying AI to government challenges, while at the same time generating a 5-minute demo, like, it's highly leveraged for us in our time on investment and our return on investment for that, because we don't have to spend so much time we don't have to hire so many proposal writers to respond to each individual RFP. We can access the system and again have that conversation be more problem oriented and be more fluid in how to solve challenges, rather than saying like, okay, we're scrawling SAM every day for the next RFP or the next RFI and being responsive. Like, that isn't time spent building our solution. That isn't time spent being able to further build out our capability. And we can, through Tradewinds, we've been able to really focus on generating the best product possible and trusting that this platform can give us an avenue to have these productive conversations when we get to the point of like, okay, how do we actually do this? So again, we've been very avid fans and advocates of this. And frankly, like when we have our conversations with prospective agencies that we can partner with, we have been actively routing them to them. And sometimes like there's a good incentive model here because we've been actively routing to them and doing our part to educate our prospects and the prospective agencies that we're working with to say like, hey, glad you like us, glad you want to talk with us. Like, we suggest you use Tradewinds because it's easier for every party involved. And those have been very productive conversations.
Just to build on that pre-award conversation, it's very good for the government to be open and transparent with them. The beauty of this is it's post-competition. You don't have to be afraid to have those open conversations with them about what your requirements are and worry, oh, I'm not sharing this information with everyone else, or, oh, I'm giving away our requirements and this could be competitive. You really can build that relationship from the start. You bring them what your problem is, and they'll tell you what they think the solution is. In the end, you may decide, no, that's not your solution, but you can have those candid conversations. Maybe they'll show you a demo of the software so you can get a better idea. Things like that start building up to determining whether or not they have what you need to solve a problem. You don't have to be afraid of having those conversations. And even to the point where I've I work with a lot of non-acquisition personnel. So I'll ask them, can you provide me a requirements document? And they'll be like, I don't know what that looks like. I'll give them a brief overview, like, project description, some scope, tech requirements, and they're still lost. And I can say, work with the contractor to actually document what your requirements are. So then even before award, you both are understanding the same problem and the same solution set. Whereas when you are in those FAR 15 open competition scenarios, you have your requirements document out there. They propose to what they interpret it to be. And then after award, you find out, oh, well, they thought you meant this, or you really meant this, and you said it unclearly. And there's a lot of churn there. Maybe modifications need to be done. But if you're doing all that up front and being open and working with them to create that common understanding, it really makes it smooth sailing post-award. So I encourage everyone, don't be afraid to communicate with them, have those conversations. It's market research. You're fine to do that.
Yeah, Kristina, your points also inspired one more thing. I think that's a huge benefit of Tradewinds, which is it is a much easier pathway for smaller actions. It's much easier for industry and it's much easier for government. So if you think about just the sheer amount of manpower and hours that need to be dedicated for like a traditional FAR 15 action, on the government side and creating the RFP and releasing the RFP, doing source selection, competition, et cetera. Also, don't neglect the industry side of like the number of industry team members that just have to get involved in the proposal development process and having the conversations and interpreting and creating a response, creating pricing, et cetera, like all of those cannot be utilized to do like a 2-month prototype, right? For like X number of states. Like, so what we've seen in our conversation is those 2-month trial periods, like just don't happen because the sheer startup cost doesn't exist. But through Tradewinds, like you can have a conversation, hey, like we want to prove that we are able to do our to add value, like let's get started. And like let's get started, that line of reasoning doesn't just get kiboshed by like, oh, actually it's not feasible because we need to dedicate like 5,000 people hours into this. Like let's get started in 9 days, right? Like we can have those conversations, right?
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Appreciate that. We got a question.
Hi there. Great conversation. Thank you. I'm Anne-Marie Johnson with CGI Federal. How do we help bring government customers to the vehicle? How do they get funding over to you, or how does that work? If you could help me understand that a little better.
Ooh, I love the spicy question. All right. Couple thoughts here. So at a high level, the solutions marketplace is top of funnel, market research, solicitation, competition, and then it's on to the rest of DoD to figure out the contracting piece, like the actual mechanism, the money, all of that, right? So that's, I guess, the 95% of the time answer. I'll share that just through some research, right? There are some options. So CDAO taking your money or taking other government's money to award a contract on your behalf, I'll say isn't really an option today. We're solutioning that to see if there is some sort of fee model that we can implement to help do the assisted acquisition. We're not there yet. I'll offer, there are others, right? Like we have like GSA FedSim, DTIC has a model, DITCO has a model. So there are solutions for actually having someone else do an assisted acquisition for you, where you pay some base level fee. Obviously, finding other contract vehicles that are within scope, those kind of things can happen too. I don't know, Steffi, if you have more to add on that. I'm riffing. No, you're good. Okay.
So they don't send money to Tradewinds to do the action for them. You can direct your customers to Tradewinds, provide them a link to your video, tell them how to sign up as a government user so they can access those videos, things like that. And then, they can even download the handbook right from the website, and it'll talk them through the award process, recommended documents they should have in their file, different things they should be considering, determining what type of contract vehicle or agreement vehicle they're using. So I would just direct them to the TSM website and the link to your video.
One thing that we do is as we push prospective government agency partners to Tradewinds, we tell them like, hey, this is our preferred pathway. And then there's a very handy PDF. It's like the Tradewinds user guide, user handbook. We just email them. We're like, hey, this is our capability statement. Also, like, this is how to use Tradewinds. And people have, followed the directions, and it's been fairly intuitive. And actually, one of our customers that partnered with us through Tradewinds, they were like, man, like we followed the directions to a T, and like we thought there was going to be a catch, and there was no catch. And like they reached out to, I think they reached out to CDA like a number of times to be like, okay, like we did what you asked, like what do we do? And they're just like, follow the next step. And like they just did what was listed, and it was pretty self-explanatory. And again, like the sheer lack of friction here, we've not experienced it anywhere else. So it's been a transformative experience that sometimes belies expectations, but in the best of ways.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a two-part question. You talk about the speed of making the awards. Are you providing sample contracts and OTs up front? And are you, how's it working? I mean, are other people coming to you and making and you're making the awards for them, the different agencies?
I think 95% of the time, no, right? So we have a user guide that you just mentioned. We have kind of like the how-to. We can give that to the buyer, whoever that is. But no, the majority of what is happening is the DoD requirements owner has their contracting shop, and they're just using our solicitation and competition to make their award. But they're the ones that are writing the contract and making the award from their office. Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just heard you made some awards yourself. Is that for your own agency?
Oh yeah, absolutely right. So yeah, for like CDAO requirements, we can use the marketplace too, just like the rest of the department.
Okay, and you haven't had any protests or anything
no.
on that?
No.
Sounds like it's kind of like an office-wide BAA in a way,
sure.
That we used to call, but it's similar. But I mean, there's no charge for joining, right? I mean, there's no
right. Yeah.
Anyone can just submit the video and you find out whether they have the capabilities, and then other people can look at these videos, and other agencies, and determine whether they want to proceed. So who runs the Tradewinds marketplace? I mean, is it you have a contractor running it?
Yes, we have a contractor, kind of a dual part answer. We have two contractors that support the marketplace itself. One is process driven. So, like evaluating, doing the assessments, like that part of it. There is platform workflow, hosting of the videos, like all of that. So they're our ecosystem to make this happen.
So the government isn't making the assessments; it's a contractor.
Yeah. So I mean, it's actually a preferred method to have scientific and peer assessments done. There's some good publication I can send you on that. But effectively, it's the government that's making the decision, me or one of my peers, based off of a assessment by a third party. All right, so that was Tradewinds Solution Marketplace 101. We've navigated the Tradewinds from the northern and the southern hemispheres. We've made our way to pitch a tent, and we are at campfire, and we're going to move into a little bit more of a moderated conversation. And I'll hopefully talk less, and you guys can talk more.
I have one more question from the virtual platform. What has the fiscal year obligation rates via Tradewinds Marketplace liaison for government agencies? How has this changed year over year change?
Can you say that question again?
What has the fiscal year obligation rates via Tradewinds Marketplace liaison for government agencies? How has this changed year over year change?
I don't know that I have, at least on the top of my head, like the dollars obligated that have gone to contract award via the marketplace. If that's the question, you want to understand that to be the question?
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I think the word liaison is kind of throwing me off with that. So I'm just going to be blunt. Yeah. But I think if I'm understanding it correctly, that there is CDAO does offer some help. Again, with things like at the very beginning of Solutions Marketplace. But again, going back to what we've discussed before, it's really up to whatever agency and their contracting office utilizing, Tradewinds, because again, it's not a contracting vehicle. It's a tool. Yeah. And so we do have numbers of, how much we have awarded. But that's one of the metrics that we're working on, again, is the tracking and traceability of the other government agencies that will be using this, and how much money is coming in and being utilized underneath the Tradewinds umbrella. Yeah.
All right. I got some questions for you if no one else has questions. Tony, you kind of hit on this, but I'm just curious, your model in terms of like how it's changed your pitch to government. I guess I'll say it this way. We get a lot of the narrative or a lot of the question from industry that says, I successfully made it into the marketplace. Where's my contract? Right. And so that's a constant, like, well, you got to the awardable status, you still have to like sell your product. So I don't know if you want to talk to that at all, but that's just a narrative that we're constantly overcoming.
Yeah. I guess the response there would be, again, to focus on the alternative. So the same would happen with the true contract vehicle, right? You get a schedule somewhere. Where's the contract? Like, where's the task orders? Well, you still have to put in the work, but it gives you a platform to work off of in order to officially like consummate the relationship between industry and government. I guess, from my perspective, I often look on the commercial side of the world, and you hear about business deals being like brokered over lunch, over like conversations. And yeah, there's all the things that can go wrong with that aspect, but there's all the things that go right with that aspect of like not being overly dogmatic with terms and line items and trying to like expressing a problem and working together to solve the problem. And this is, for me, and from our experience, a huge leap forward in achieving that kind of aspiration of, hey, government has, frankly, a number of challenges and problems that they have to face. Industry can solve them. Let's not let the brokering of the deal get in the way of solving those challenges. And so, if you're a solution provider that doesn't solve a challenge and somehow, let's just say theoretically, somehow you snuck onto the marketplace, like if your solution doesn't solve a problem, like there's not going to be government customers who want to work with you. But again, if you are a solution that solves a problem, too many times in past history, you're a viable solution that can solve a problem, but you cannot solve the problem because of X, Y, Z, right? Like, and you're just removing, Y and Z. And there's still hurdles that you have to clear, but it's a few less hurdles that you have to clear.
Yeah, awesome. I'll go to Kristina. So this is something we see at the various levels. One of the reasons we have the champions, where we've created the marketplace that's like, specifically pillared on BAA, CSO, and OT solicitation. But I think in practice, we've seen challenges, what I'll call like local policy. Like we've seen challenges where it's like, well, the FAR says I can do it, but my office says it's this, right? Like those kind of things. So just curious if you had to overcome that, what's that process like for you? Barriers for you as an Air Force contracting officer?
So I'm lucky. I work out of Hanscom Air Force Base. Our previous SES, one of the first things he did when he came in was he rescinded every local policy we had, because why do we need more policy? But others, they do. They have other documentation requirements that aren't necessarily restrictive from what I've seen. It's more of a paperwork exercise for a lot of them in trying to get everyone on the outside understanding what they're doing. So really, it's been about just open communication, being available to answer those questions. I provide like separate trainings on Tradewinds to different contracting and even organizations wider than that, just to go through the entire process of Tradewinds with them and let them know what the value proposition is, talk about different things, how data rights or IP may apply in different scenarios depending on the agreement, just all the different things that I know they're going to have to get through when they go to legal or they go to policy, and all those questions that'll be asked, and how these solutions are there to help solve your problems, and don't treat it like a FAR 15 acquisition. Like, be very purposeful in your approach to this. It's not traditional acquisitions. You have to be more open-minded. I always promote relational contracting over transactional. There's a place for transactional. It's not here. You really have the opportunity to build something great with your contractor. So I try to be as open and transparent and answer as many questions as I can. But I haven't seen too many local policies that have put a hamper on it. Occasionally someone's like, oh, well, we got to write a J&A. And I just educate them on the competition process and explain how they met those competition requirements depending on the agreement they're making. And then everything seems to go away from there.
Yeah, awesome. I'm going to go to all three of you, but I'll start with Stephanie. OT or FAR, and why?
So the Stephanie answer is gross FAR, OTA all the way. But that being said, we know that there is a spectrum of the toolbox that we have as contracting officers and contracting specialists. So the entire toolbox includes FAR, non-traditional or OTs, and then also the Dodgers, which I know sometimes people say it a different way, but the grants and agreements statutes that we have. So I would say it's dependent on what you're purchasing, right? It depends on what you're trying to do. If you fall within the statute of prototype, then by all means, go OT, or potentially you could even do something underneath Dodgers. But if it is something that is needed to be in the FAR, then utilize the FAR. There is gray space. There are ways of innovation that is allowable within that gray space within the FAR. But again, I'm OTA all the way. So.
I am split. I do more FAR-based than I do OTs. That's predominantly due to some Air Force regulations that require more reviews and approvals in order for me to move forward with an OT. So if I'm doing like a straight software buy that's under $5 million, I'm just going to use a FAR because I don't have to go to legal policy. I don't have to ask anyone, mother, may I? If I'm doing something more complex or something that I feel really needs some unique terms and conditions that I can't get from the FAR, then I'll take the time to get that determination signed off. I'll take that time to go through all the legal reviews and all the other reviews, because it's more important to have the right T's and C's in the contract and get the right agreement overall in order to satisfy whatever the problem is in the end. But yeah, those simple ones, I'm just going to bang out a purchase order for that. Yeah.
I'm going to give the cop-out answer, which is it depends, right? So in our experience, we have received both OTs and we have received FAR contracts as well. And our biggest contract ordered through Tradewinds was a FAR-based contract, which may come as a surprise to some in the audience. The benefit of the OT contract for us was the increased flexibility that it had. The potential risks associated with the OT for an OT agreement for us was the flexibility that it provided. So despite kind of the challenges that the FAR poses, it does provide pretty clear-cut definition and clarity on a number of domains and a number of subjects that you couldn't possibly replicate in an OT agreement, in an OT document. And FAR-based contracts do inherit a lot of that clarity and definition. And so, we ran into our first agreement, OT agreement, which happened off of Tradewinds. This was many years ago before Tradewinds. We were able to get up really fast and get rolling really quickly, but the language of the agreement presented some ambiguities with regards to like intellectual property and such that were clearly defined in the FAR, but you're trying to cover too many areas. In our case, we were trying to cover too many areas within that OT agreement, and that clarity was not achieved at a comparable level in that OT agreement. So eventually, and because we were transitioning from like pilot/prototype into a production phase, we, in this particular case, we moved forward. Our contracting officer moved forward with the FAR-based contract. And like from an industry perspective, we don't really, or I don't really have an opinion. We receive whether an agreement or a contract, like it is nice, but the challenges I've seen the government face is flexibility is both a boon, but also can present a challenge at times. So it just really depends on whether you need that flexibility or whether it's more comfortable to live within the structured regime that the FAR presents.
Yeah, appreciate it. Good conversation. Maybe Stephanie, just from Tradewinds, I'll say some of the not harder, but like more in-depth questions that I've been asked. So I'm curious your perspective too. Any nuances for Tradewinds for international sellers, international buyers, and I'll say federal non-DoD buyers. So kind of three things there, if you have any thoughts.
So on foreign companies, foreign nationals, that is definitely something that we look at case-to-case basis, because again, we could be talking something like NATO partners or a Five Eye. And so we need to make sure that what we're doing is appropriately vetted. And so we do have a a security team that can assist us with that, but not everybody has that. Not everybody has someone that can help vet with them. So you could go the super easy route and say, you know what, this is open to just U.S. citizens, just leave it at that. But if you are willing to potentially partner with someone within NATO or 5I, you do have an aperture that opens greatly. We have been able to do that with several of our agreements, and we've had great success with that because we've seen what our NATO partners can help provide for us that maybe we're not thinking about and helping to fill that gap. So in regards to what were the other two? It was foreign entities and other government agencies.
Yeah, like Department of Transportation, like those kind of things. Yeah.
So a lot of times, so I've spoken with Department of Veteran Affairs. We've got friends over at DHS, so we've been talking with them. I also talked with some folks out of the IC. So a lot of times, what you'll hit at the very, very beginning is the cultural barrier, right? Because first of all, you're not going to talk the same language because anyone in the DoD is going to speak DoDese. Anybody outside of that in the federal workspace that would be considered civilian agencies or fourth estate, they're going to be talking their own language. So first of all, you have to kind of get over that barrier of, my acronym is not your acronym type of scenario. But then based off of that, you still are going to run into that cultural barrier of, we do things differently. We do things XYZ way. And that's great. You can still do things XYZ way. You just have to find a way to talk their talk and to incorporate what it is that you're doing. Again, you also have to worry about statute because a lot of the things that we have been discussing here are in accordance with DoD statute and regs. There are, I think, and don't quote me on this because I can't remember Ben's number. It's like 33 I know, sounds just bad. There's 33 or 35 federal agencies that have OTA authority. So again, that's not talking about a ton, considering how many federal agencies we do have. So again, not everybody has the same authorities as we do within the DoD. So again, there's going to be that cultural barrier of anything from the semantics of your language, going up to, do we actually have permission to do this? Do we have statute that allows us to do that? I think there was one more. Was there one more? Was that it?
Yeah, that was it.
Okay. That's my answer then.
I appreciate it. And that concludes. I've personally been with CDO for 3.5 months, so it's been a short trip so far, and I love it because Bonnie threw me in, and I had a speaking engagement week 1, and she sent me to Miami, I think, my first week, and I was like, "What's Tradewinds?" And I'm on stage talking about it, right? And so learned a lot over that course of time, and I've kind of reframed the message to what you heard today, which is why I kind of start with the regs. Because I think that federal question is one that I get all the time, and it's important to understand that, absolutely, FAA can use Tradewinds, but if they want to do it, here's how. FAA happens to have a more flexible OT environment than DoD does, right? So absolutely, they have BAA, of course. GSA and DHS have a CSO, right? So just understanding who you are and what your regulations are, it's kind of why I like to highlight that up front in terms of understanding why and how this works. So appreciate that. Under 10 left, so you want to just kind of do if you had 2... Yeah, a speed dating. All right. Yeah. I mean, if you had 2 minutes of whatever your soapbox is, we'll just go down the line. You want to do that? All right, go for it.
Tony, you want to start?
No.
Let me go last. Oh, you want to go last? Okay. Okay. So my 2-minute spiel. So I would say after doing this for a little while, that what we're trying to offer to everyone out there is just another way, another pathway to award. Are we saying that this is the best thing that's out there? No, of course not. But I mean, I guess outside of a audience this big, I'd be like, yeah, it's the greatest thing ever. But honestly, we're just trying to give you guys a different pathway. We're trying to make our lives a little bit easier. And I'm saying our lives as in anyone within the federal workspace that would have their finger on some sort of contracting action. We have a tendency to over policy ourselves. We see something new and inventive. And what do? Oh, let's policy all over it. So we're trying to give you everybody here in the federal space the ability to try and do something that might make your lives a little bit easy, or easier. And so we're happy to, discuss more, and we've done some mentoring. But a lot of it is going back to your own commands or agencies and saying, okay, listen, it's weird, it's different, but you got to trust me on this. I just want to try it. And you start off kind of small, doing something, low dollar value. You can even do non-monetary agreements where you figure out a mutually beneficial relationship between you guys and the vendor. Make it super low risk. But really all we're trying to do is we're trying to give the DoD and the Fourth Estate the ability to do what it is that we're doing anyway in a less restrictive and faster, more agile manner.
So I do love Tradewinds. I think it is the best thing out there right now. With that being said, it's the construct that I love. They don't cover every strategic area, and that's fine. That's not their purpose. So whenever I can, I'll promote Tradewinds as much as I can if it'll meet their solution. But if it doesn't, I also promote the construct. I think a lot of organizations can benefit from creating their own Tradewinds that focuses on what their problem sets are. And I think that'll open up a lot of opportunities for all of the DoD to really start moving at the speed of relevance and stop being dogged down by those FAR 15 traditional acquisitions. So I think even if you can't use Tradewinds for what they offer, their construct is something that should be looked at as a possible alternative. I work with predominantly small startup non-traditionals, and they're always looking for, like, how do you get after that government customer? How do you interact with them? What appeals to them? This appeals to them because Tradewinds did the heavy lifting of the competition. So, like, one of the things I always recommend to them is, one, make sure you have a GSA schedule, make sure your socioeconomic status is right. If you have a SIPR, promote that and get on Tradewinds, and you can promote that too. And it provides that direct route for a customer to get after whatever your solution is. And it's already been competed, so they check that box as well. So it's really beneficial to everyone involved on both sides. And just think more people, the more they learn about it, the more it'll be used and hopefully grow, and others will take advantage of it as well.
Yeah. When it comes to Tradewinds in particular, they're definitely a marketplace for more cutting edge, more bleeding edge technologies. We BidScale, we're an AI powered contracting platform. We want to be part of that ecosystem. We exist on the cutting edge. We want to continue being on the bleeding edge. It'd be ironic if the ability to deploy cutting edge and bleeding edge technologies was restricted by antiquated methods. And this is what excites us, is like, it's not just a transformation of the capabilities that agencies are able to deploy, but it's also a transformation of just like the methodologies and philosophies available to them in order to execute that deployment as well. And I alluded to this previously, but longer term, especially as the awareness on this platform increases, and more entities are joining both from the agency side and from the industry side, it acts as like a coalescing of and creating a density of people who are interested in specific domains, like in this case, a lot of artificial intelligence conversations. So we exhibit at every NCMA, and last year there was very limited conversations about AI. This year, AI, there's definitely an increase in the conversation of AI, and like that's been awesome. But throughout that time, like one bastion where we could always have good conversations about AI was like through people who were involved in the marketplace, and so it almost acts like as a community of interest on top of it being like a marketplace and a transactional process where we know we're in good company when it comes to particular topic areas. And that ultimately is going to be a feedback loop that's essential to making sure that solutions solve specific problems rather than creating a solution without a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. Before we wrap, I just wanted to make sure there's no last questions. Cool. Okay. For the 50% that put their hand in the air, appreciate you coming out and learning more about Tradewinds. For the 50% that didn't know what Tradewinds was and showed up, thank you for just taking a chance on listening to this, learning more. Appreciate that. That is absolutely the culture and the mindset that we want to mold, right? Is the idea of just like taking a chance, seeing what works. Let's continue to experiment. let's move from the driver's seat to the driver's seat, right? I mean, this is our, I like to use our Department of Defense, our federal government. It's not the Department of Defense, right? It's ours, right? Let's drive, make a difference, find those solutions that we can to make things, I'll say make more sense. I won't even say go through red tape, but just make sense, right? So with that, I think we'll close. Appreciate it. There is a culture acquisition section after lunch, so shameless plug for that one. Thank you guys for coming out today. Appreciate it.